Welcome to the Anxious Love Coach podcast, a place for creating meaningful, conscious, secure, long-term partnerships. Here, we talk relationship anxiety and creating healthy, magnetic dynamics within partnership to help you feel confident and alive within committed partnership. My name is Natalie Kennedy, and I'm your host. I'm a relationship anxiety coach and meditation teacher. I've worked with hundreds of clients battling anxiety, and after experiencing extraordinary shifts in my own healing relative to partnership, now combine my lived personal experience and professional training to help others trust themselves within relationship and in their lives. I've been to the edge and back with my now husband from relationship anxiety and come out confidently to the other side. I want to pass the tools I've learned along to you to help you trust yourself in relationships and also create magnetic, hot dynamics with your partner. I believe lots of mainstream relationship advice today can make us anxious and dissatisfied. So let's jump in and normalize challenges that modern relationships and real people go through while also giving you tools to trust yourself, drop the shame, and alchemize your messy, twisted relational truths into profound inner wisdom and aliveness. If you haven't yet, be sure to join my communities over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Anxious Love Coach. You can also request a 30-minute relationship anxiety assessment with me depending on availability, or ask me a question over on my website at www.anxiouslovecoach.com. I've also got a wonderful relationship anxiety meditation available to you as thanks for subscribing to my email list. Thanks for being here and enjoy this episode. Hello. Welcome back to the Anxious Love Coach podcast. It's nice to be back here. Thank you for listening today. A little heads up, we are currently in Vienna and it is a Monday on a work day and we are on a somewhat busy street. I think it's going to be quiet enough, but I'm hopeful we won't have any background interruptions that we cannot edit out. But I'm feeling hopeful that we're good today. I wanted to open up with a story about something that I just felt called to share on Instagram this week. It's something that you can go to and find. Even if you are listening to this later, even if you don't follow me on Instagram, you can find this. I recently realized that one of my gifts, although it is coaching and it's meditation, but as I go deeper into Anxious Love Coach, what I really love sharing with you is stories. And throughout my mindfulness journey, I have become more and more sensitive to metaphor. I often pull from my Argentine tango practice to learn about partnership. I often look to nature to understand boundaries and patterns. And in that way, I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. And so often, the times when I get the most generously enthusiastic feedback is when I share a story and people tell me, I went through this too and it resonated so much with me. You know, advice can really be taken out of context and sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. And advice is a lot like medicine. The dose makes the poison. You want to make sure that you give the medicine to the right person at the right time and the right dose. And medicine advice is just like that. If you've ever received unsolicited advice, you know what it's like to receive something that's not meant for you. It might have been medicine for someone else and it might have been poison for you. This is actually what I learned back when I was studying pharmacy. The dose makes the poison. So what's medicine for one person is poison for another. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to give out blanket advice. And this is why I recommend people to send me Wizio requests, which is kind of my way of looking at a person's situation as best as I can, given a paragraph or two that they've sent me, and try to feel into their situation, feel into their emotions, and respond to that person uniquely. But one of the limitations of podcasting is I am looking at patterns that I see in the world. Not necessarily things that happen on an individual level, but something I see in the collective, and I share some relatively generalized thing. And sometimes it lands with people and sometimes it doesn't, and that's just the nature of how podcasts work. I'm going to try to give you information that gives most people the most bang for their buck, but inevitably I'm going to miss the mark sometimes, and that's just the way things are. Social media is even worse in a way, and we're going to talk about social media today, specifically about how it is turning us against each other. And the story that I want to share is recently, as I started realizing that, I felt a desire to share more stories. And I started noticing a pattern that the more I shared the nitty-gritty details of my relationship with my husband, Preston, who I've been with for 11 years and married for a little over one now, the more I shared like the petty, small, day-to-day, mundane, or difficult things, the more people long to hear more of that. So I put out a poll recently and I said, I want to tell you more stories. That's what I feel called to do. I don't like just journaling and having nobody look at it. There's something in me that finds putting stories in my journal to be very lonely, or maybe the stories inside my journal feel lonely. And so I want to share them with you. For me, it's like art, putting it out there for the world in a particular way that people seem to resonate with. I find that so strange and also wonderful. So I put out a poll asking, what do you want to hear? Do you want to hear more fights that we've had? Do you want to hear more mundane moments? Do you want to know about the beautiful, incredible things? What do you want to hear about from my life, I guess? And overwhelmingly, people wanted to know about our fights. So I shared a big one, the biggest fight Preston and I ever had, on Instagram, and I'm not going to share it here because it's worth reading through. Besides, I have a different fight to share with you today and what I learned about it. That one is all about that time 2 weeks before my wedding with Preston. 2 months before our wedding, Preston came at me pretty much saying like, I think I'm going to want an open relationship someday. Are you going to be cool with that? Safe to say we are not in an open relationship, and we ended up not doing it, but we heavily considered it. And I shared the intimate details of that argument on Instagram. So if you go to my Instagram, Anxious Love Coach, and you look at my story highlights, if you scroll far enough back, it is currently August of 2023. If you just find, something from August 2023, you'll find it. And I also shared what I learned from more importantly, what I learned from that argument. And we have not really had that argument to that extent or to that intensity ever since. That doesn't mean we don't fight anymore. We definitely do. Our fights are, for the most part, pretty respectful, but we do tend to fall into an anxious avoidant dynamic often. In an argument, I tend to lean more anxious. My husband tends to lean more avoidant. Not to say that these are our personality traits, but when we get triggered, these are often the patterns that we fall into. I try to repair quickly. My husband maybe needs more space. So all this to say, today's episode is not about fights, but more so about how social media is turning us against each other. And I'm going to share a fight that my husband and I had literally an hour ago. And I was going to record another episode today. And I still might, but this is fresh on my mind. And even though it still stings, I still feel inspired to channel what I have learned from it, even though we are not quite out of the woods, but we've gotten everything out. The respect is there, and now we're just kind of cooling off on my own. And in a way, I am alchemizing what I've learned from today's fight, today's kerfuffle, alchemizing it into a podcast so that it can hopefully not just be something that he and I learn from, but maybe as you listen to this, you'll hear a bit of yourself or your partner in this dynamic, and maybe you can learn from it as well and not make the mistake that I made today. So you guys wanted to hear about our arguments. I shared one on Instagram this week. Again, if you want to hear it, check it out under Nat's story highlights. And yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the conditioning that I have received from the internet, especially things like TikTok or Instagram, which these content bites, and I say bites because they're so short that they could never possibly contain enough nuance to a whole situation. And I'm going to speak to also a dynamic between men and women today, But just know that this is not limited to men and women. It could be feminine identifying, like people who are feminine and people who are masculine. I find that there's plenty of polarization happening there. There's polarization happening everywhere. And it's not just between men and women. So if you're not in a heterosexual relationship, you don't necessarily have to think of this in terms of men versus women, but anywhere in your life where you perceive there to be a lot of polarization, this type of fight might be helpful for you to witness and just maybe zoom out. Because sometimes when we're in the argument, we don't see the other factors at play. We don't see, the wounding from way back when. You don't see the other person's wounding from way back when. You don't see your cultural stuff. You don't see your family stuff. So I share this with you. So maybe you can look at the argument that my husband and I had today from an outside lens, and maybe you'll be able to see something that you couldn't see before when you were inside the argument, having the exact same fight that maybe I would be able to see if I were looking in from the outside, right? So the conditioning that I have received from apps like TikTok is men don't actually care about women. Men are stupid. Men are incompetent, sometimes intentionally, and yet they pretend that they're not. Men want to do the bare minimum to provide for you, but will not check in for you emotionally. And you as a woman will have to bear the emotional labor. I cannot tell you how many messages that I have received like this. And indeed, when I see messages like this, I used to get very triggered and very frustrated and upset because these women or people would be sharing dynamics in partnership that were infuriating for them. And I would see a little bit of myself in their dynamic. I would see, yes, I have experienced that. And this woman is angry about it and says that it should be different. And therefore, oh God, it turns out I'm getting the short end of the stick too. Well, if I'm getting the short end of the stick, well, I need to do something about it. I need to go correct my husband. And then I go start a fight about something that previously didn't bother me. This happened to me, for instance, when I saw a video from a woman who said, if a man buys you flowers and he doesn't take it out of the bag and he doesn't put it in a vase, he's not giving you a gift, he's giving you a task. And that was the first indicator where I was like, what? Excuse me? Yes, it's still a gift if it's not put in a vase. Oh my God. Now, does that mean that a man can't go above and beyond and put it in a vase for you? No, of course he can. That's Jedi level gift giving, is when you go out of your way to add a little bit more. But if I had the choice between no flowers versus flowers in a bag, I would take the flowers in a bag. My God. So that was one of the first videos where I was just like, okay, no, this is just entitlement. And if you're going to complain about how flowers are given to you, think about when you have a graduation and your sister brings you flowers, they're not giving you a task. They give it to you at the graduation ceremony and you take pictures holding it. Like you know full well that you're going to have to put it in a vase. Anyway, I am just ranting now because that video really pissed me off. And what really pissed me off is the comments in this video saying, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. And I should be more angry about this. No, you shouldn't. You were completely fine with this until you saw that video. However, I'm all for men making videos for men saying, hey, guys, here's a way you can take it to the next level. And your woman is going to be so impressed. She comes home and the flowers are already there on the vase and she doesn't have to, take it out of the bag. Like, that's Jedi level. I'm all for that. What I'm not cool with is women telling women that they should not settle for a man who only brings them flowers in a bag. I'm not cool with that. Anyway, so this is kind of an example of the types of content that pin people against each other. Where there was no issue before, there suddenly is because someone decided that there is. So this is a really quick way to know whether you're getting emotionally hijacked by someone else's entitlement or someone else's perception of a situation. just because someone else feels like they're getting the short end of the stick when they get flowers in a bag versus flowers in a vase, doesn't mean you're getting the short end of the stick if you are totally happy receiving flowers in a bag. So there's a lot of this type of conditioning, and I fell victim for one today. The one that I saw today is if your man is walking ahead of you, it means they don't respect you or care about you. Now, here is the background context. This has happened a few times. Most of the times when my husband and I take a walk together, it's a really pleasurable experience. I love walking with my husband, and all indicators show that my husband loves taking walks with me. That's not changing. That's been the case ever since COVID, and we started walking together around the neighborhood and discovered that we really like walking. And so now walking is a thing. But there have been a handful of times where my husband walks like 10 feet ahead of me, and I'm like, what? Why? What are we doing here? And I felt a little sad when it happened. I'm not going to lie about that. But the difference between it being okay and it becoming a problem is the meaning, association, and interpretation that you assign to the event. So what happened today is I saw a video, and it's basically was a woman saying, if your man's walking ahead of you, it means they don't respect or care about you. I went down this rabbit hole, and not only do they not care about you, but apparently this is a sign of a narcissist. And I was like, whoa, that jumped ahead really quick. Now, a little bit more backstory. When I was younger, I used to see married appearing people who appeared to have been married for many years, like couples in their 50s or 60s. And I would see the man walking far ahead of the woman. And I was like, man, that feels kind of sad to me. And so when it happened to me once or twice, keep in mind, we have walked together what feels like millions of times, but this has happened to me once or twice, maybe 5 to 10 times over the course of an 11-year relationship. If you think about it, that is a very small percentage. So, but the times that have happened, I remembered it because it stung. So, I've got that background of watching old couples walk apart, and I've had the background of it happening to me a handful of times. All right, I am perfectly primed to get triggered by a TikTok video, okay? So, apparently not only does your guy not care about you, but he's a narcissist. And I knew that was a bit of a stretch for me. I was like, my man is not a narcissist, far from it. But I also was like, hey, there's a lot of women upset about this. It's not just me. And this is a thing. Sometimes partners walk ahead of other partners. And indeed, I think in a lot of cases it is because of disrespect. But I would say that's only the case if it's happening really regularly all the time. And even then, there's a lot of reasons why a person might walk ahead of you. I have recently taken up photography, and I really enjoy stopping and taking photos of things. And if my man stops every time I stop, he won't get to see anything that he wants to see. So sometimes he'll like go off and do his own thing when we're on a walk while I take photos. And in those instances, I think I might have interpreted that like, oh, he's far ahead of me. When in reality, he's just, exploring the area and he's not going anywhere. But the interpretations that we make, yeah. So when I saw it online, I realized a lot of women go through this and that they feel upset about it. So I went to my husband and I said, hey, I saw something on TikTok. And I realized that I have some feelings about it. I wanted to clarify your motives around something that I've observed you do occasionally. And when this has happened before a few times, I always felt a little sad when it happened. When I saw it online, I realized a lot of women go through this and feel upset about it. Would you clarify your motives for when it's happening? I interpreted it as you wanted to go ahead and explore, or you were feeling tired and didn't want to talk. So the reason I shared all of this is to give you, this podcast is already like 18 minutes long. Oh my God. But think about it. The video on TikTok, it encompassed everything in 1 minute. I have just given you 18 minutes of context that was not in these videos. That is why I think this is important to share. So I shared my background, my history, what I perceived in the background, and that was just my side of the story. Now we have to look at Preston's side of the story. So I'm going to try not to have this take forever, but I hope that how long it took me to just share my side of things illustrates how not black and white of an issue some things on TikTok make them seem. So while my conditioning is that men don't care about women, and the messages out there say that men want to do the bare minimum, men are not emotionally attuned to people, men are not socially attuned, men don't care for you emotionally, you're going to have to bear the emotional labor. That's what I have received from TikTok. Meanwhile, Preston watches his own stuff, and he has received his own barrage of conditioning. Part of this is probably from witnessing some stuff in his own history, stuff in his own parents' marriage that he maybe was not so happy about seeing, and stuff that he's heard from men's coaches, or stuff that he's heard from even just male influencers sharing their experiences. So what he has received is women don't care about you or the big things that you provide. They don't care about the money you make. They don't care about the freedom that you sacrificed in committing them. You have to be a rock. You can't have any weaknesses. You can't be vulnerable. Your value is only based on how much you can give to the family. And yet it's still never going to be enough, because women today can provide for themselves, so they don't need your money. So you need to be able to provide money, but you also need to provide all these other things. So that is the messaging that Preston has received, and understandably frustrated. That's been the reality. That's been the experience for a lot of men. And it makes sense that if you perceive this, that women don't care about you or the big things that you provide, and they don't care about the money, they don't care about the sacrifices you make, they don't care that you sacrificed your potentially polyamorous free spirit, if that's what you wanted, all these sacrifices that you made, women don't care. If that is the message you received, you're going to feel resentful. That makes sense. And if on top of that, you receive even the slightest message from your partner that you're not appreciated, it's not that statement stings, but that statement pokes at the already huge sting caused by the conditioning. So when I came to my partner today, or when I came to Preston today, and I said, hey, I this is what happened, and I saw this video and it brought up some feelings, and this is my interpretation, and I have a sting that's here, and I kind of want to talk about it. Well, my sting activated his sting, and even Buddha might get triggered by this. Now, I think my husband handled it really well. He was understandably very angry, and he checked out a bit, and I got anxious, and we fell into a pattern. And I'm not here to say that we handled it beautifully. Safe to say, Preston and I were not having a conversation with one another. We were having a pre-programmed argument that society had instilled in us to hate one another. So I'm not arguing with Preston. My conditioning is arguing with Preston's conditioning. And I think it's important sometimes to, first of all, if you get really, really triggered, I know for some of you, it's going to take every fiber of your being to take a break. And I did do this, and I went to the other room and I cried a little, and I looked at more TikTok content of this kind, and I looked through more comments, and I felt validated in my sadness a little bit. But I also, the more I looked at this, the more I saw this from Preston's lens, which was that women are not really looking at the big picture here. And there's so many reasons why a man might walk ahead, or a woman might walk ahead. It could be that, they naturally don't like walking at your speed. anyway, there's so much nuance to this conversation, and it's not black or white. So eventually I came, and I think I said this already, but I'm going to share it a little bit bigger. I eventually said, may I please share what was going on in my head and what my perception was. Notice that I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm saying my perception is flawed, but may I share with you what my perception is? So it's good to get consent. And this happened after we had taken a little bit of space. I said, I have seen on many occasions men walking 20 feet ahead of their woman when they're on a walk. And whenever I saw that, I felt sad. And I've seen this throughout my life. Like, why go on a walk together if you're not together? And so when it happened with us on just a few occasions, although it is very rare, I was sad, but considering all the other wonderful things in the partnership, I decided to choose my battles in that moment and just focus on me. Eyes on my own paper, right? But when I saw a video made on TikTok about this dynamic and realized it was very common and that other women feel sad about this and heck have even left or divorced their partners over it, I felt angry and upset. So I know you care about me. So I didn't want to assume that when that happens, you were doing it because you don't care about me. That's not even a consideration. I want to assume that you're not doing it out of disrespect. But if disrespect or you not wanting to be with me is not your motive, then I have to assume it must be because you were tired or irritable or wanted to be left alone. But again, that's another assumption. And granted, this has only really happened on a couple of hikes and also when we were traveling with my family. So I just wanted to share like the whole background. Now, my husband's response was, typically when I'm walking ahead of you, we're in a city that we're unfamiliar in and I am navigating. And also, even if I was tired and wanted to be left alone, that would be a reasonable request, or that would be a reasonable want. I responded, that makes sense. Validation is important. That makes sense. I guess it would be wonderful if you clarified your motive in that moment, because I have no way of discerning whether you're walking with me / my family out of obligation and looking for a way to subconsciously get some space from us, or whether there's some other motive that I'm not seeing. In other words, I can't tell if it's subconscious or intentional. If it's subconscious, I'd like for it to be conscious, and if it is intentional, I want to know what that intention is. Preston responded with, that makes sense. I can agree to that. I typically walk ahead when I'm navigating. Sometimes I make wrong turns, and so I want to be walking ahead to make sure that I am on track and that we don't both end up backtracking. Okay, wow, I had not thought of that. And from that lens, this man actually cares a lot. He wants to, it's really cute, actually. I don't think that way. And because I don't think that way, I assume that nobody thinks that way. But from that lens, my man is trying to save me time and energy by making sure that we don't end up having to turn around. He's checking far ahead to make sure that, we're on the right track. So, to be fair, I don't care that much about backtracking so long as we're together. But my point is that because of our conditioning, my conditioning that men don't care and his conditioning that women don't care, we're both assuming the worst of one another, that we don't care. And isn't that what we're just all really frightened of? Even if your partner's been with you for 11 years because they care about you, because no one stays with someone for 11 years if you don't care about some aspect of the relationship. I'm sorry. No one stays that long if they're not getting something out of it. Even if there's a lot of shit going on, something keeps them there. And I think a lot of people judge when people are together for a long relationship and are seemingly unhappy. People are multifaceted, multidimensional beings. It's not helpful to judge people that have stayed together for whatever reason or another as long as they have, because there's a reason that they're staying. Might be unconscious, might be subconscious, but for whatever reason, that reason is the strongest reason. And it's been very helpful for me to reframe and suspend, I suppose, my judgment of other people's choices to be in partnership. Ironically, it has freed me to trust my own decisions in partnership. So when I trust people's decisions to break up or divorce, and I think, oh, they got to do what's right for them, and I trust that they trust their decision. Or when someone decides to stay together and it doesn't make sense why they'd stay together, it's helpful for me to remember I trust that other people trust themselves. Good for them. I don't know what's best for other people or other couples. I only know what's best for me. And I know that if my husband gets me flowers in a bag, I will say thank you, and I will cut the plastic off, and I will trim the ends of the flowers, and I will arrange them prettily in the way that I like it in a vase. So we all want the same things, and we're all terrified of the same things. And it's very easy to consume other people's content, other people's short form, 1 minute, zero nuanced content, and make these whole stories about those people based on how it applies to us. And we can find ourselves more and more wounded the more we consume this content. I believe it's very dangerous. This video that I saw today, my relationship would be better off if I had not seen it. It did not add much value to the relationship, unless maybe it did just by me recording this podcast and sending this out. I hope it adds value to you because, man, that argument, I hope that this podcast was worth it. A lot of times when we're having an argument, I am thinking, man, I better learn something really useful that I can share because otherwise, what's the point of all this? What's the point of fighting if you don't learn something, if you can't alchemize the shit into gold, if you can't turn the darkness into the light? So in a weird way, I am processing this as I'm sharing it with you. We're all terrified to get the short end of the stick. And when we perceive that we might possibly get the short end of the stick, that we might get taken advantage of, we often get selfish and withhold, and dare I say, our narcissism kicks in. I'm not saying you are a narcissist. Only that narcissism exists in everyone, and it can get activated to varying degrees. Personally, when I perceive that I might be getting the short end of the stick, often my pattern of narcissism kicks in. And I could say the same about my partner, and I believe that I could say it about anyone. If you witness dynamics with your parents or caregivers, or even just dynamics on social media that you didn't think were nice, it would make sense that you potentially obsessively try to prevent perceivedly bad things from happening. But just know, when this happens and you get righteous and your narcissism kicks in and your righteousness kicks in, you're going to step into your ego. And the ego is not bad. The ego is just your sense of separateness. It's the I. I am this and you are that. I am different from you. I am separate from you. This is beautiful for creating art. It's beautiful for differentiation. It's beautiful for creating something out of nothing. It is toxic when we start to, like I said, focus so much on ourselves that we become blind to the experiences of the perceived other, when in fact, we're all connected, we're all one, and I can't hurt you without hurting myself because I am you. And this is why polarization is beautiful when it's a tango and when it's a dance, and polarization can be destructive when it turns into war. And we're actually two sides of the same coin. I'm afraid that you don't care about me, and you're afraid that I don't care about you. Both of us care about each other, but because of our interpretations, we're fighting against our perceptions of each other. We're not actually in connection with the real truth, which is love. So if you're all me in that moment, you're not going to be able to see the big picture. You're not going to see how your environment and your past has conditioned you to get pinned against the other. So are you arguing with your partner in the moment? Or are you arguing against your perception of who you think your partner is based on your conditioning and what you were told about men or women? So I encourage you to pay attention to when a piece of social media gets you riled up. It's designed to do that. those are the videos that go viral. I struggle with this sometimes because the videos that I make that are nuanced, they get like no views. And so I have to make these polarizing videos just to get attention, to drive people to my podcast, which is where stuff is more nuanced. I don't like this design, but it's just what's so. I make intentionally polarizing content, clickbaity stuff that even I'm just like I cringe, but I'd rather get more people this message. And that's kind of the only way I know how to do it. If you can think of a better way, DM me and let me know. So these videos are designed to rile you up. They lack context, including the stuff that I make on social media. It also lacks context. It's just the way it is. It turns us and our partners into robot narcissists when they might just be wired differently than you. And it takes time to learn how to get clarification and learn how to communicate, right? If I were to do this again, this whole thing today, if I saw this video again, I would not say anything. I would not bring it up. My husband, I had a beautiful morning, and last night my husband was talking about how obsessed he is with me and how like it doesn't get any better than this. And I was just like, man, this is so gorgeous and so perfect. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't bring issues up, but I also would say that there's often a better way to bring them up, and there's often a better time to bring them up. This morning, after things had been super sweet, going into the kitchen and saying, hey, I saw a TikTok, let's have a fight. I would not do that. I also wouldn't swallow my pain around feeling a little abandoned when my partner walks ahead of me. It's not like I'm never going to bring that up, but I might not do it out of the blue when we're having a peaceful morning. I wouldn't do that. If I were to do this again, I would wait until it happened again, if it happened again. If it doesn't happen again, wonderful. Problem solved. But let's say it did happen again. My husband were to walk ahead of me. I might, because I still don't know his motivation, I might ask if he's walking ahead because he's navigating, because he wants to be alone or something else. I'd ask for clarification. I would say, I'm making this assumption, but I don't know if it's a real assumption. Can you clarify it for me? Because I know that you wouldn't do something because you don't care, right? So if I know for sure that you're doing something not because you don't care, well, there must be another reason. I encourage you, if you're going to be in a partnership with someone, to always hold the assumption that they love you more than anything. So if you know that they love you more than anything, then the reason they're doing that weird thing is not because they don't love you. It must be something else. If you don't believe that your partner cares about you, that's something to look at. Why do you think that? And it could be based on interpretation. It could be real. That's a whole nother topic. If you got something like that, send me a Wizio and I'll try to get to the bottom of it. But I'm speaking, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, to patterns. A lot of times when we're with a really loving partner and they do something like walk ahead of us, okay, if we know for sure that they're not doing it because they don't care, it must be something else. Get clarification, ask for their motive. More than likely, your assumption of their motive is incorrect. And another thing that I might have done differently today is I did do this, so I'm not going to say I'm going to do anything different. It's okay to take space when you're pissed. I'm recording this podcast instead of forcing this conversation to happen. In fact, in recording this podcast, I don't feel like I need to talk about it because I feel like I got the most out of this. My husband is my podcast editor, so he's going to listen to this when he edits it. And the beautiful thing is, in a weird way, Anxious Love Coach is a family business. I'm planning on hopefully starting a family someday, maybe soon. And I wanted a very simple business so that I could be a mom. And yet this podcast and this business is still a very big part of my life and in our lives, actually. Like I said, Preston does so much of the behind the scenes stuff in this business. So in a weird way, this Anxious Love Coach is a little family business. It's us. So this podcast and our arguments and what we share, it's bigger than both of us. And we want to share our stuff if it helps others. I see a lot of really polarizing content, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about the fights and the messes, especially in real time like today. And I also know that I talk a lot about polarity and having really conscious, fulfilling dynamics. And we're not perfect. Conscious partnership does not mean no fights. It just means you fight better, right? So I love you, babe. Thanks for editing my podcast. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you enjoy hearing about our arguments and how we got through it as a married couple, feel free to shoot me a message on Instagram. It makes it really worth it to me when I know that my shit somehow gets alchemized into gold for you. So let me know. I'm definitely not doing this for clout. Okay, maybe a little part of me is. Don't judge. Anyway, there is a part of me that really just loves putting this out there. The main reason I love putting it out there is feeling like I've turned something messy into something beautiful. I also do love receiving good feedback when something lands with you, or if my story heals you in some way. Like I said, I do believe that stories can be healing when we hear ourselves in them, and also when someone else hears themselves in our story. Seeing someone and being seen is the most healing thing there is. So I'm going to stick to my strengths, and those being storytelling, especially the messy ones. I also want to point out that the arguments that Press and I tend to have, they are worlds ahead of the arguments that we used to have. I used to be very, very critical. I was slow to apologize. And if I did apologize, it was to sweep things under the rug quickly. And, there's still a little bit of that, but it's much less than what it used to be. I breathe a lot more in arguments. I slow down. There's a lot of moments of silence while we're both processing and feeling ourselves and discerning what we would like to say. And my words are a lot more intentional. I don't often say things that I don't mean. I typically say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And part of this is because of how important language is to me. I have studied language intensely over the last 5 or 6 years, just on my own, and also through trial and error and witnessing patterns in what people respond to better. So it's not even so much a method of manipulation, although you could call it that. It's more so when I'm actually honest and I'm not speaking in terms of my assumptions and interpretations of people, my own good intentions come through. And I don't need to lie. I don't need to sway the truth in any way. I know that we all have the same needs and the same wants, and we tend to fear the same things. So I speak in terms of my vulnerability and I share what I observe, but I also don't take my own thoughts too literally. And that's a skill. It has taken me a long time, and it's something I'm very passionate about. A lot of times when I say something I don't mean, when I say something like that, it's not actually coming from true, open-hearted, loving me. It's actually a conditioned response from a wounded part of me. You ever feel like some part of you takes you over that you don't recognize? Yeah, that happens to me sometimes. But that part's not conscious. When I am conscious, I mean what I say and I say what I mean, for the most part. I'm not perfect. So, like I said, conscious partnership does not mean no fights. It just means you fight better. I have to say, I have an enormous amount of communication skills. It's something I'm very proud of. And I have put in a lot of hours into becoming good at communicating. So I wanted to let you know that it is my birthday. Not today, but in a couple of days. By the time this comes out, it will be Monday. My birthday is on Wednesday. So please send me an Instagram message on Wednesday and say, happy birthday, Natalie. I love your podcast. I'm going to run a birthday sale on all of my courses. Because I have a communication bundle, which I'm going to link in the show notes. And I also have Both Feet In. And I also have my Quit Comparing Your Relationship in 7 Days mini course. My communication bundle includes 2 programs. Both of them are very short. There's my Conscious Communication mini course and my masterclass called Watch Your Language. The conscious communication course is more so about nonviolent communication. There's a little bit of polarity stuff in there. And Watch Your Language includes that as well, maybe a little bit less, but more so body language as well. 80% of communication, believe it or not, is nonverbal. And so I believe that really mastering that 20% of verbal communication is very important. But don't neglect body language, because that's really important too. When you're fighting with your partner, are you hunched over? Do you have your arms crossed? Do you have your heart center turned away from them? And I say this not so that you can nitpick how your partner fights, but just eyes on your own paper, my friends. How are you? What's your body language? Do you have a furrow in your eyebrows? So this is where mindfulness in arguments becomes really important, paying attention to your body language. So Watch Your Language is both about verbal and nonverbal communication, and you can look at the descriptions. My whole point is through the end of August, because it's my birthday. And the code is going to be birthday 31 because I'm turning 31. So you can use this code on any of my self-study programs, Both Feet In, Quit Comparing Your Relationship, any of my communication courses, or the communication bundle. So if you get the communication bundle and you take that 30, did I say 25% off? 31% off my courses. You're going to get 31% off my courses with the code birthday 31. So if you use that birthday 31% off the communication bundle, you're getting even more. So pretty cool. And that's it for today. If you have a specific challenge that you're working through and you want my input on that, feel free to send me a Wizio. Sorry, I don't have a birthday code on that one. But yeah, I hope that today's episode was helpful for you and that you got a lot out of it. I'm also taking 3 new one-on-one clients for the end of the year. So feel free to send me a DM on Instagram if you're interested in working one-on-one. My programs are between 3 to 4 months. I just opened a polarity program for women in partnership with masculine beings called Evoke His Devotion. It's all about how to get your man to step up without him knowing why. And that one is my first program that includes self-pleasure practices. I recently got a certification in things like yoni egg. Yes, it can potentially go up into your vagina, but you can also use it as a massage tool. And it's awakening pleasure inside your vagina. So that is really cool. I'm going to do a whole episode on that later, but not today. But pleasure is one of the most powerful ways to get your man's attention. So if you're walking around feeling really alive and exuberant, your partner's going to magnetically be more into you. So there's that. There's way more I could talk about that than I could in finishing this podcast responsibly on time. But if you're interested in that and you want to take a look at the info page, I'll link that up in the show notes as well. If you are struggling more so with relationship anxiety, I have another program that is one-on-one, but it doesn't include those like women's vitality, self-pleasure practices and things like that. So that one is, I'm going to link that one up in the show notes as well. So depending on kind of where you're at in your partnership, you can apply for either one-on-one program. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for listening today. I hope you got a lot out of this, and I look forward to catching you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Anxious Love Coach today. If you loved this episode, please hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and maybe share it with someone that you believe might benefit from these perspectives. Please also subscribe to my email list at www.anxiouslovecoach.com, as I'm trying to reduce my reliance on social media. In exchange, you will receive my free relationship anxiety meditation and more supportive tools sent your way. If you would like to work with me, head on over to my website at, again, anxiouslovecoach.com to explore different tiers of coaching options and online programs. Thanks again for listening, and catch you in the next episode. Have a blessed day.